I'm going to show you how to make date caramel. And the reason that I like to make date caramel is it goes in some of my favorite dessert recipes. It is a great sweetener to have on hand, so if you're making something like oatmeal, you can add in some date caramel rather than some maple syrup. And that's going to add in some extra fiber and some extra minerals that the maple syrup or whatever sweetener you're using wouldn't have. It's a very simple recipe, and the main ingredient is dates. Surprise, surprise. And I have this big thing of dates, but today I'm going to use my magic wooden spoon that I found on eBay and see if I can turn this single date into multiple dates. Whoa, well that sure worked pretty well. And they're even chopped. So now I'm gonna guess this is 2 cups worth of dates because that's the spell that I used. So that's out of the way. Now all I have to do is stick these dates into my container for my high-speed blender. So I'm just gonna take all these chopped dates and place them in here. The other ingredients that are super important are liquid and probably a little bit of salt. And I want to teach you how to make date caramel the way that you want to make it. So I'm going to go over a few things. The liquid, you could use filtered water, you could use almond milk or any vegan milk, you could use coconut water, which would be really good and I've done before. And you're going to use a little bit of salt. However, today I'm going to use coconut aminos. And this is going to add a salty component, but coconut aminos have a nice flavor on their own, and they're going to add that to the recipe rather than just a salty component. So that's another way you could do it different. And then you have the option of adding some vanilla. I have vanilla extract and vanilla powder, so you could really use whatever one you had on hand. And that's the basic components. You want to determine how much liquid you put in depending on what you want in the end. If you want a spread, say you want a very thick spread where you could slice some apples really thin and then you could spread the date caramel on, you put in less liquid. Say you wanted a date caramel that was a drizzle that you could put on top of some raw banana and ice cream. You're going to add more liquid so it actually pours, or you could put it in a jar, take a spoon, and then drizzle it on top of ice cream. Before I add the liquid, I'm going to add in my salty component. Today I'm using coconut aminos. I will let you know down below in the description how much salt you would use if you were just going to use salt. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons. And one thing to be aware of is the amount of sodium in coconut aminos compared to salt. 1 teaspoon of coconut aminos has 90 milligrams of sodium. So we're looking at almost 200 milligrams of sodium, but 1/4 teaspoon of salt contains 265 milligrams. So quite a bit of difference in the amount of sodium. So I would only want to use maybe 1/4 teaspoon compared to 2 teaspoons if I was doing salt instead of coconut aminos. I do know that I want some vanilla in my date caramel today, so I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon of the extract. I have 1 cup of almond milk. I'm going to start with 1/2 cup and see what that looks like when I blend it. With 1/2 cup of almond milk, I have pretty much just the right consistency that I want. This is not too liquidy, so it's not going to drizzle. It's also not really super thick. I'm going to use this in a raw Snickers recipe, and this is about the consistency that I want. And why I believe it's so important that you determine how much milk to put in compared to your dates is because some dates are going to be juicier than others. Some dates that I've worked with are really dry and they're really hard, and they're going to need more liquid compared to juicy dates. Also, what you might be using date caramel for could change depending on when you make it. Another thing I wanted to mention is I use 2 cups of dates. That's my minimum amount. And there's probably times where I'd like to make less, but in order for the blades to start spinning in my container, I need at least 2 cups of dates. I've tried it before with less and it just won't spin at the bottom because there's not enough stuff in there to push around with my tamper. Another thing that you could do if you wanted to change this recipe up is you could soak 1/4 to 1/2 cup of cashews and then add them in. That's going to give it more of a creaminess because of the fat and a little bit of protein. What's cool about this stuff is it's just going in your Vitamix or whatever high-speed blender you have. So you can add in a number of things to make it customized to your liking. You could do a little bit of cardamom. That would be delicious with some vanilla and dates depending on what you're putting it in. That's pretty strong flavor, so you would want to know. But if you were doing some sort of caramel, cardamom, cashew cheesecake, that would be pretty delicious. And what's awesome about this is there's sometimes only 2 ingredients, maybe just the liquid and your dates. But even if you use vanilla, salt, dates, and a liquid, you only have 4 ingredients and you know everything that's in here. This stuff's really delicious on a lot of different things. I really like dipping fruit, especially apples, in date caramel, so it's a great snack if you want to satisfy your sweet tooth without eating a dessert. Keeps well in the fridge for, I'd say, about a week. And I'm just going to store mine in a glass mason jar just like this. Put the lid on, put it in the fridge, it's good to go. I can take out just the right amount that I need for my raw Snickers recipe, and I can also take a little bit out with a spoon and throw it in my oatmeal or whatever else. Even if you were just going to have a bowl of fruit for breakfast, you could take a spoonful, throw it in there and stir it on there and coat it really well, and that's going to be delicious. I hope you give date caramel a try. It's a really delicious recipe that I like, and I like that it has extra minerals. And the minerals that are in dates, in case you're wondering, it's pretty high in potassium, usually about 25%. And then on the lower range, about 10%, it's going to have magnesium, manganese, and copper. And there is a little bit of protein, a little bit. There's about 3.6 grams of protein in a cup of dates. So in this, there's 6 grams. Clearly not going to eat all this, but there is a little bit of protein, good amount of fiber. And since you don't have a magic spoon like me, you will have to just chop the dates up yourself. That doesn't take very long. And one thing that I want to remind people is every date you open, just look inside real quick. It's not uncommon to find dates that have these little black bugs in them, and sometimes there's a bunch of leftovers because the bug's been living in there. I don't think this is a gross thing. It happens maybe 1 out of 10 to 15 dates. But I think that's a good sign if a bug wants to live in your food. And it's not a big deal. So just keep that in mind to open your dates when you slice them in half real quick and look. It's sometimes you don't see any in a whole batch, and sometimes I've seen like 3 in a row. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. If you like the video, let me know. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and comment. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next recipe. I'm just gonna go in for a little close-up here. You can see how well this amount of caramel fits in this kind of jar. So it's the perfect jar to get for this recipe. And another thing, it's pretty difficult to get all of the date caramel out of the blender. So a little tip for anyone is plan to make this recipe when you'd also like to make a smoothie, because if you put your milk, remaining milk, or any milk in your fridge in the smoothie with a banana and some other frozen fruit and some greens, then you're going to get all of that date caramel out of there a lot easier than getting your finger in there or the spatula.